Well, welcome back. I'm really excited about this episode. It's been a long time coming, and I am a closet fanboy of Sterling. I've followed your career from early when you worked with Matt to the Divvy. What you guys built at Divvy was just something special, and I think the things that I admire about you. From the outside, we've spent some time together, but from the outside, I love the way that you are so certain on the direction that you're going with things, and that you just like tell your story kind of unapologetically. And when you're leading companies, and you did that with Divvy, you've been huge champion for Pelon, and we admire those guys so much, Blake and Chad and all those guys, that are building Pelon. It's been fun to watch your career from the sidelines. So excited to go kind of dig in.
Well, very, very kind of you. Not sure I deserve any of that, but I am grateful. So, and excited to chat.
Yeah. So talk to me about kind of where it all began. Like when you were getting started, did you know that you were going to go into business and entrepreneurship? And obviously like sales is like part of your DNA.
Yeah. So like everybody else, had the classic like lawn mowing business growing up. Like a lot of people too, did the selling candy out of my backpack.
And home was where?
Winnemucca, Nevada.
Okay, so small town.
Yeah, super small. And we didn't. No one knew anything about startups. There's no such thing as like venture, but always was getting attracted to building stuff and learning and trying to do it a little bit better. Really probably started to get most of the learning. So when I was 14, my dad, he ran physical therapy clinics. And I always kind of thought I'd work for my dad when it was time for me to get a high school job or whatever. So one day I go in and I'm like, hey, can I get a job? He's like, you don't get to work for me until you've worked for somebody else. And that was kind of a shock. So I go out, I'm filling out applications, stuff like that. As this 14-year-old, my mom's like dropping me off, and end up getting a job as a busboy at this restaurant called The Griddle. And the Griddle's on I-80 in Winnemucca, and I started as a busboy, and the two people who started, it was a family business, they went to Idaho to open up more locations. And I'd been there for a while, but they left me in charge of this restaurant. And
at 14.
So I was probably more like 15 and a half, 16 by the time this all happened. But we're doing like millions of dollars a year in revenue. And I'm doing, the accounting and the banking and the hiring and the firing. And I'm learning like crazy. And one thing I hated, because it's on I-80, kind of seasonal. So in the summer, people are driving, restaurants busy. We had a lot of staff. Winter months, we would kind of shrink down. Hated it because I'd have to go to, a single mom and say like, hey, we only have 20 hours this week or whatever. So I started, I didn't know what I was doing, but I started doing like demand gen, right? I started these programs, started our first like social media campaign, started our first mailer, started all this stuff. Fixed the seasonality so I didn't have to reduce people's hours. And I was like, whoa, that was way more fun than waking up at 4:30 to run this restaurant. So that became like the first business. And I took that and put this marketing and sales agency together and went to other restaurants and went to other doctors. And we got, public works companies like high schools and courthouses, things like that. And it's like, that's kind of where it started.
It was ridiculous. You're 16 years old.
I was pretty young. I was pretty stupid.
I owned a bunch of restaurants.
Yeah.
And like to think of a 16-year-old that's working in one of these restaurants that goes and fixes our seasonality.
Yeah.
Like I'd give that person a trophy. Like that person they'd get equity in the company.
So the lady who I worked with the most, name was Ashley Ferguson. And she was the most demanding person to this day that maybe I've ever worked for. Everything was just so. If it wasn't perfect, you were getting screamed at. And I look back, and that was the best education anyone could have ever given me. And she did trust me. And because I cared, I wanted everything to work. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted the business to grow. And so she trusted me.
But how much wisdom for your dad?
Yeah. Totally.
to say like, I just know that I can't demand out of you what somebody that's not your dad. Like,
Yeah.
I think about that with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the soft side of your heart is just like you want them to succeed and give them every opportunity. But that's not really how the world works.
Not
like,
really.
The world's a little more nasty. You know what I mean? Like when you get in the arena, it's less, woolen gloves, if you will, like it. And to have somebody that's hardcore, but also that like believed in you at a young age, that's got to be like such a gift.
I think it's the cheat code to life, right? Is how do those people that are pivotal for you give you those experiences? The whole idea of preparing the child for the road, not the road for the child, is something that I think about a lot. And certainly like my parents did me a lot of favors there.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, that takes wisdom, and it also takes like a little bit of discipline, because it's kind of scary, like to send your kid out to the wolves.
Yeah,
you're kind of trusting, but that's like how you became who you became. Like I think about like that experience. That's got to be like so foundational for your belief that like I can do this. I can create revenue. I can manage a budget. I can manage a P&L. I can hire and fire. Like those experiences, you don't get those like at that age. No one gets those experiences.
I agree 100%. And I think one thing that I've always tried to do is how can I learn the lessons for the next phase right now? And I think that started working at this restaurant at the Griddle. It's like, how can I learn how to manage people? Not that you're ever done learning how to manage people. You can always get better, but can I do that at 16 when most people don't get to do that till they're 26? And then when I'm 26, what can I do that most people don't get to do till they're 36? And I can cram a lot of compounding into like my career and into my life. It's kind of the idea.
So you do that, you start your other company, you're kind of like the king of this small little town. You're just like the Pied Piper, just walking around like giving value to all these companies.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
How do you go from that to moving to Utah County?
Yep. So I finished high school and was running this business, and most of my friends went to UNR. It's like the University of Nevada, Reno. It's kind of where everybody goes when you're in Northern Nevada. And I just remember like having some pretty tough talks with myself in the mirror. If I go there with all my friends, with all my comfort, I will become exactly what everybody else is going to become. Not that like they're amazing, phenomenal people, but I wanted some different things. I had some different ambitions and some different goals. Yeah. So I needed to be different.
Yep.
So I knew that. And Utah was different. And UVU was different. And, I really wanted to have like a different experience. And so came out here and like gave that a shot, even though just mostly because it was uncomfortable. Yeah. And I didn't know exactly what it was going to mean.
And you came out how old? When did you show up?
I would have been 19. Yeah. When I came out, just a little baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And came out, jumped in, finished college there.
Nope. Dropped out.
So dropped out.
So the part of this story is, so start at UVU. I'm running this business. I get it in my head because now I'm in Utah and stuff was happening. Like there were companies raising money. I was reading all the Qualtrics articles. Like I'm reading all this stuff and I'm like, okay, venture-backed startups. That is the major leagues for this like entrepreneurial thing. I just got to get in the door.
Yeah.
So naively, I did a bunch of research and was kind of like, okay, what are the rocket ships? And Jive had recently won an Ernst & Young award, which like now I know how that stuff works. I didn't at the time. I was just like, this is awesome. They were actually in the middle of a hiring freeze, but they had this one rec that was open. It was called a retention specialist. I was like, sure, I'll do it. Like, absolutely. The role was basically to save people who were trying to churn.
Of course. Right?
And that's how I got in at Jive. And I ended up like getting promoted a bunch there, getting to report to one of the founders pretty quickly. And I was like, I don't know, 10, 12 credits away from graduating. And they offered me at the time, I think the youngest director in the business. And I was like, what am I doing this school thing for? Like, and in my head, it was security, but I was completely wrong. Like my learnings, my ability, that was the security, not like the degree or whatever I thought. And so I was like, okay, drop out of that, go all in here. And that was like one of those big decisions for me.
Me and you have that in common, that we're both UVU dropouts.
I love that. And now you teach at BYU.
I do teach at BYU. I was actually teaching up there today, and I taught on something that I've never taught on before, which is kind of this concept of change your story and change your life.
Yeah.
And I was going through this list of all of these insecurities that I had of not finishing school and not, getting a good ATC score, and, not being in finance and being a door-to-door salesman, and, all of these things that, they were insecurities. And there was some point along the journey where I just started embracing who I was and my story. And I think when I did that, it was so empowering just to own it and just to say, this is my story and it's a beautiful story and I'm going to love it.
100%.
And now I'm super proud of it, but I think there was a time where maybe I wasn't as comfortable in my own shoes, and you're trying to be something that you're not, you're trying to fake it until you make it.
So I think that's gold. The analogy I always use is if you're trying to act like somebody else, or you're trying to fit a particular mold that isn't genuine to like who you are, it's like trying to do a squat with one leg. It's like you only have half of your power.
Yeah,
you only have
that's
half.
so true.
And so when you really lean into like, no, this is who I am. And again, it's not everyone's cup of tea. Some people are going to think I'm this or I'm that, I'm dumb or I'm ill qualified, whatever it is. That's fine. But I'm going to squat with two legs.
But I think that's, again, something that I've admired about you is there's an authenticity where it feels like from the outside looking in that you've been comfortable with your journey kind of all along the way, that you've been deliberate with it, and, you've just kind of owned it.
I think I got there, and hopefully I got there early. That's like, I want to get to the best destination faster, but 100%. And I think one thing that you realize, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is when you are very authentic and you're also like very clear about it, you attract the kind of people who are attracted to that.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to be everything to everyone, you very quickly find people who have the same core values, the same dreams, the same vision, the same work ethic, like you name it.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like a cheat code. The more authentic I could be and the more out there I could be,
you're just going to connect people that are drawn to it.
That's right. And you repel the ones who aren't. And that's okay. Like, this isn't about rights and wrongs. It's just choices. We all have a lot of choices.
Yep.
And so I want to make and help people make the best choices.
The other thing that I've heard about you from a lot of different people that I know and actually really respect is you have an ability to kind of become indispensable to an organization, that you're kind of a value creating machine. And that has just pushed you to bigger and bigger roles and responsibilities wherever you've gone.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot. And I'm like, I think about, man, what could I teach my kids? Is like, this is what you want to be in your career.
Yeah.
And I think it's that. I think it's that you create so much value wherever you're at.
Yeah.
That people just can't not promote you, can't not give you more responsibility. But talk to me about that. Was that natural? Was that something that's just, you had leaders that kind of coached you through it? Or was it just something that intuitively you just said, man, if I create value, I get to claim a piece of that value, or it'll open doors for me?
I think it really goes back to, I just care more than anybody else. So you take Divvy, like, I didn't start it. I wasn't a founder, but I think I cared about it every bit as much as the guys who did.
Yeah.
And like, genuine.
You were all in.
So I stressed about it. I lost like all of the things. And I think when you put yourself in that mind frame, you're driven to just find ways to make it work.
But you were that way at the restaurant.
I was.
And
I for sure
I think
was.
that's, what I'm seeing is this pattern of just value creation, being a person of value, being a contributor, and because that getting promoted kind of endlessly, from like you're coming in at a junior role at Jive.
Yep.
That's not a senior role. That's
individual contributor.
That's a junior role.
Yep.
But all of a sudden by the end of it, you're like very important to the business.
Yep. And I think I've only ever reported to founders in my whole career, by the way. And founders have superpowers, but one of them is not being able to tell you what to do, because they don't usually they don't know.
They just know the direction.
They just know the vision, and they know where this thing and how big it gets and pace. They know that kind of stuff. But it's like they can't teach you how to sit down and run performance marketing. They can't teach you how to, build a model. Like, you have to be able to do all of that stuff yourself. And so you have to have kind of the qualities of a founder with also the ability to learn and adapt.
But I think about like this parable of the talents. And you've got the master that, gives 5 to 1 and 2 to 1 and 1 to, and then he leaves and comes back, and the one turns 5 into 10. Yep. The one that turns 2 into 4. But then there's one that gets scared and hides the talent. Yep. And I think about that a lot, because I think about like this idea of like, if I'm the boss and I give somebody responsibility, and not only do they they bring it better than, like, I gave them a job and they over deliver. Yeah. What do I do with that person?
More.
Double it up, like give them as much as you can give them, because they're so they just get stuff done. Yeah. And what do you do with the person that you give them something and they do nothing with it and then have excuses? For sure. You rip that sucker away and you give it to the person with a ton on their plate, because you're like, at least it'll get done. And I remember going through this parable being like, that's pretty harsh to the master to take the one away from the one who doesn't have it. Yeah. But when you think of it from a founder, that's exactly what you do. It's like, if somebody is getting results, feed them the rock.
And you don't care.
You don't care.
I don't care if you graduated. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care what your ACT was.
I don't have time. Just go solve this. And it feels like you've kind of been that person. Yeah. That as a founder, you're like, you're my best friend. I just am going to keep piling stuff on you because you make it better.
That's definitely been the goal, right? That's definitely been the aspiration.
How do you teach that?
I don't think you can. I wish you could. Here's what I think you can do. I think you can give really high horsepower people, you can give them the opportunity. Yeah. You can give them the talents. But the more you have to be involved in the saying, do this, do that you've actually lost the plot. And they're not. A lot of this is all about your perpetual motion. And can you take someone else's stick figure and turn it into a Mona Lisa?
So, doing this kind of executive program at Harvard. And there's this guy that I'm trying to remember his name, professor. He's my favorite professor in the class. So one of my favorite professors, Eastern European guy, super funny, really smart, but his whole thesis is on hiring people. Yeah. And his summary after a whole lifetime of work is, in senior technical roles, you have to hire capabilities. Okay. Like a CFO, if they're not good, they're just not going to make it. Yep. You need them to perform a tactical job today. But in more junior, attitude matters way more than the technical skills. For sure. Because they'll figure out the skills, but if they have the right attitude and the right effort. And it was fast. It made a lot of sense to me because, there's some of those you just don't have time to learn on the job. Yeah. But most of them you do. Yeah. And it feels like on a lot of those, you didn't have the skills when you got started.
No way.
But you just had a lot of drive and and kind of a can-do mentality.
And I remember, so when I first joined Divvy, no one had no institutional money, really no revenue. Nobody really knew about it. But things started to work quickly and we started to get big fast. And I just remember being like, hey, if I want to keep this job, I'm not going to keep it because I have the most experience. Can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can be the fastest learner and you can implement things faster than anybody else. And that's why when you're looking on kind of the other end of the spectrum, it's like a CFO, you can't really mess up. You're going to go to jail. You're going to lose. Like, you can't screw it up. But there's a lot of things where if you bring somebody in and their slope, their trajectory is just higher than everybody else, you'll have a much better outcome. And that's definitely been my experience too.
Is find those kind of shooting stars and just say, put them in a spot to shine and know they're going to make some mistakes.
Absolutely.
No, that's so cool. So you're at Jive, building that company. When was the switch to Divvy, and why was the switch?
Yeah, so went through the Jive journey. Amazing founders. Like it's kind of an underrated Utah story.
Who else?
Matt Peterson, John Pope, Mike Sharp, Andrew Skeen. They're in Brett Thompson. Like there was a lot of really talented people on that founding team. So I was there, got to be involved in a lot of the revenue stuff, got to report to a founder, got to be involved in meetings that I probably shouldn't have been involved in.
You're how old?
Shoot, 23, 24, something like that.
You're like young.
I'm young.
Yeah. Young. And in meetings that are pretty senior meetings. Yeah.
And then I got to own them. And the reason why I was in the meetings is because I was the guy they were going to turn around and say, okay, like go make this work afterwards.
Yeah.
So I made myself kind of valuable, but went through that process. And we sold that business. That was, a almost $400 million acquisition, which only like $20 million in primary capital raised. So like really, really cool, cool exit.
Big outcome. Yeah.
We did that. And the company that bought us was, a $10-ish billion public company, logged me in. And they were wondering if I would go to Boston and be part of like the corp dev team. And I really liked the guy who was running it. And he was saying, hey, come help me find the next Jive. We'll go do this. And it just had a lot of, some roles feel more prestigious for some reason. That one felt prestigious.
Yeah, it felt like, oh man, this is like
big time. Yeah. I'm from Winnemucca. I'm going to go to Boston and, buy companies. And it felt big. At the same time, I get a message on LinkedIn from a guy I've never met, Blake Murray. And he basically says, hey, I've heard good things. I think what we're doing here can be really big. Do you want to come be the guy? And I responded and I kind of was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Just come and hear me out.
So full blown like cold contact.
And I learned after the fact, he knew some of the same like investors and executives and stuff. So he'd heard some people say, if you can grab Sterling, like you should try.
Isn't that fascinating? Like, I think that idea that like your reputation precedes you for good and for bad.
Absolutely.
And that like literally like what got you that opportunity
for sure
was doing a great job at Jive.
For
you
sure.
know what I mean?
Yep. And you know how it goes. Like founders are always saying, well, who was at a company that did some good things that's ready for a little more responsibility, a little more visibility and stuff. So like we did that. And like I'll never forget that first meeting with Blake. He kind of like gets up on a whiteboard and he basically does Divvy on a whiteboard. And I'm just like, this is gonna be massive. Like the idea is massive. Now you have to underwrite like how much value can I bring? How much am I willing to bet on myself? Because I believed in the idea, and Blake had founder power.
He really does. He's kind of a force of nature.
Oh, and in those early days, if he got you on a whiteboard, like it was just over.
Yeah,
like he raised money. I think through. So the A and the B for sure, no deck, no nothing. Him on a whiteboard, and that's pretty freaking impressive. He also recruited a great team, but he did it on that whiteboard. So I remember like getting in my car, calling my dad and being like, I'm going to work for those guys because if I had any, like I would invest all the money I have into that business.
Yeah.
The next best thing I can do is go
put your time in, go get some sweat equity. Yeah,
that's right.
And so it was Blake. He just sold you
100%.
Yeah. And talk to me about that ride. Cause that's like one of like the epic, that's like one of the epic stories of Utah. Like it's That's a crazy rocket ship.
Crazy. So, I mean, from when I joined to when I left, the Divvy part of that business went from like zero to like $450-500 million of annual revenue. And the team went from, a dozen, 2 dozen people to, I don't know, maybe 800, something like that. And one thing that's kind of funny to me is you don't ever get to skip the lessons of scale.
Yeah.
But at Divvy, we just did them all really fast. So it was painful. Like, it was very, very painful.
I can't imagine how
Casey,
painful that is.
I tell people, and it's not a joke, like I made $1 billion mistakes.
Come on.
$1 billion mistakes. Like things that if I could go back, no joke, are $1 billion.
It would have created $1 billion
of enterprise value at the end.
So give me some examples.
Well, I'll give you the one that's the most painful is, so we were an interchange business. None of us had ever dealt with interchange before. So we just didn't know anything. So we're chunking along, scaling this, and it's like year 2.5 or 3 before I realize there are multiple different programs within interchange. And we were on kind of the crappiest one. And we could be making way more money for the exact same amount of work just by being on a different interchange program. So I launch into this thing with Visa and MasterCard and Marqeta and try to like renegotiate all these things. And eventually we get to a good spot. But if I would have done that 3 years earlier, Casey, I think that's like $1 billion. And that was my fault. Like that was my job. And so like not being curious enough when you're new to a space cost me $1 billion, cost the eventual outcome $1 billion. And like, I'll never forget that. Right. And there's a bunch of those, man.
I'll keep going. What are the others?
So let me tell you, this is to your authenticity point. So I was a pretty young executive, and I'm hiring people, and you think, well, I need to get people who have what I don't, which is a lot of experience, a lot of credentials, and I need to like attract that. And those were some of the worst hires I ever made because they didn't align on kind of the core principles, which were like, we were an absolutely crazy bunch.
Oh, you guys were crazy.
Worked all the time.
For sure.
We wanted to go super big. We wanted to go super fast.
You take that idea of like the, 0 to 1, kind of that Peter Thiel.
Right.
And it's like, it's a conspiracy to take over the world.
That's
like when you have like a real startup culture, like it's like a blood oath,
it's
like, it really is.
It is. And
it's so fun.
Fun.
If you haven't been a part of one of those teams,
you're missing out.
It's really fun to be a part of that. Like when you wake up and you're wearing the hat and you're wearing a shirt and you're like, I'm so in.
And think about like Vivint, right? So it's this team, it's this cult that believes in these things, and you take all the crap from everyone outside and you wear it and you love it.
Yep.
And my mistake was that
to not embrace it.
And by the way, it didn't mean that the people were bad people or they weren't smart or talented. They just didn't want to be a part of what we were building.
Yeah, they felt like that was junior.
That's
that
right.
was like
it's hustle culture.
That's JV,
it's JV, whatever it is. And so like, okay, I can augment the team and myself with people who still fundamentally believe in the same approach to building this startup as I do, as Blake does. And that worked a lot better.
That was the difference.
Cost us a lot.
Yeah. I remember when I went to Vivint, and I think even of door-to-door sales, and I'm like, it's so funny because I'm one of 7 kids from Logan, Utah. We didn't have money.
Yeah.
We were middle-class family. But somehow I was too good for door-to-door sales. I was like, I don't have any skills. And I'm like, but I'm better than that job. Yeah. And I was doing it kind of just because I could. It was good money, but I was always too good for it.
Sure.
And then 2006 hit and the world imploded. And the company I'm working for blows up, lose all my money. And all of a sudden, like, the only jobs that were good jobs were door-to-door because you're 100% variable comp.
That's right.
But I remember meeting Todd Peterson, and Todd wasn't too good for the job.
Yep.
Todd owned it. Like
Yep.
he had his hat on every day. He was so proud of the company he was building. And it was amazing how, for me, that's what flipped it, was when I looked at the leader and the leader wasn't too good for it. He was completely proud of that profession and what they were creating and the value. And it allowed me to be proud.
Yep.
And it was the difference in my career. I mean, it was, tens of millions of equity value for my family because I embraced the culture, and I never would have if the leader wouldn't have. And so, when you're bringing this up, it's fascinating that, like, I think you as the leader and Blake as the leader, just saying, we're going to be hardcore. You attract people that buy into that. And the ones who don't, they cycle out, they don't last. And so, man, that's a fascinating insight that I haven't thought about.
You do have to be okay not being everyone's cup of tea. Because I think as humans, we all really want people to mostly like us.
For sure.
It hurts when someone says something bad about you or they don't like you or whatever. You have to be okay with that. You're going to be polarizing.
But I think about this like as a principle. And I think about Jesus. And I'm like, if they're going to kill Jesus, the rest of us don't have much of a chance. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, if you really look at it and you're like, if you're the president of the United States, 50% of the country doesn't like you.
Well, you go back to Jesus. Palm Sunday, they were celebrating him, throwing their clothes on the way as he rode his donkey into town. A few days later, they're choosing a convicted felon over him for freedom. So you also, from that story, realize it's fickle.
Sometimes you're the GOAT. And
that's right. Like sometimes you're the best, sometimes you're the worst, and you got to ride it.
And it moves. Yeah, it's fast. But like you said, I think human nature, all of us want everybody to like us.
100%.
Like, I don't think anybody's raising their hand saying, I want that person to hate me or whatever.
Not really.
So it's hard. Like, it's a unique dynamic of just getting comfortable if people don't buy into you and being okay with that.
That's right. And you're okay. I remember I used to take it so personally when, we'd be recruiting someone, you get right to the end and, no, it's like they're saying no to me.
Yeah.
And that sucks. But I think what you realize is people are going through different things in their life. They're optimizing for different things in their life. And it's not a choice of right or wrong. It's just you get choices and you get consequences, and they optimized for different things. And I can be okay with them making that decision, but I need to go find somebody else. And
I think one of the greatest things that I ever experienced in my career was doing door-to-door sales and dealing with so much rejection.
Yep.
Like a disproportionate amount of rejection, where I got this emotional muscle where I just got okay with people saying no.
Yep.
And it didn't bother me. I didn't take it personal. I didn't cry in my pillow at night. I just kind of realized, hey, it's not the time for them right now. And I was okay. And it served me so well in my career. But you think about that, if you're in revenue, it's not like you have to get okay playing the numbers game.
That's right. It's like baseball.
Yeah.
You get into the Hall of Fame with, numbers with 2 in front of them. You're like, your batting average is even in the best situations is pretty low.
So talk to me about that run from, 10 million of rev to 450 million of rev, and like what that's like going from, hey, we're at the backyard barbecue with Blake to we have like a real company and one of everybody wanted in that deal.
Yeah.
Like the biggest players in the country, were fighting and vying to get in that deal.
I mean, it was amazing. There were experiences I had that you just never dream of. Talking like this with Masa Yoshi-san, who's the head of SoftBank, and Jeff Lieberman and Scott Sandell on the board. You get to rub shoulders. I mean, these guys are Midas list billionaire. Like, they're just playing at a very different level, and getting to learn from people like that, I think, was awesome. Experiences you have are awesome. What you don't understand when you just see headlines and exits is it's an absolute nightmare. It is psychological warfare every single day, and you have to show up and you have to not get crushed.
Yeah.
And, like I ended up in the hospital, 3 times throughout that journey.
Yeah.
Like, no one would have said it was stress, but like I know what happens when you don't eat and you don't sleep. I was 60 pounds heavier than I am. Like, it costs. Anyone who thinks it doesn't either isn't paying attention or has no clue.
Yeah.
And even in Divvy was pretty much, except for COVID, was pretty much a straight line. Yeah. And it was still that hard.
But there was some tough times at Divvy, like COVID. You had like very reputable firms that pulled back.
Absolutely.
And didn't meet their, and these are like the who's who.
Absolutely. We got, and you learn very quickly, you can't depend on anyone. You control your team, but everything that happens outside of that, you don't have a whole lot of say over. And when COVID hit overnight, 2/3 of our revenue, poof, gone,
dude.
And we had to do a layoff. I think it was like 30% of that business. Like, I remember coming home from that day, having all those conversations, and I was the lucky one. But I remember coming home and just crying,
just so hard,
so stupid. And you're just like, this is my mistakes. Like, where did I do this wrong? And by the way, there's real stuff there that I could have done differently.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that when it's all said and done.
No, for sure. So you go kind of on this epic hockey stick run, and you bounce back pretty quick during COVID. It wasn't, there's a lot of businesses that, it really, but somehow you guys just snapped right back, and it ended up probably being a better outcome for you.
It did. It forced us to be more efficient. It forced us to be tighter on what our standards were for employees and stuff like that. It made us a better business. Yeah. I just would have rather, weeded that ourselves.
Sometimes those lessons you just can't learn any other way though.
I agree.
What truly it is, what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger.
Survival is the best mentor.
Yeah.
And so when you get backed into that corner, you learn from survival.
Talk to me about being bought by Bill, because I think anybody, especially if you're a founder on the founding team, it just changes. When you do these acquisitions, it doesn't matter how much you want it to be the same. It's just different.
That's right.
And usually there's a winning team and a losing team. Talk to me about that transition, because it's this amazing outcome, liquidity, and, so many people became wealthy from that process, and those promises that you made to these early employees that, hey, we're going to go build something great. You're fulfilling on those, but at the same time, it's a different career outcome, and it's probably not, I know a lot of friends that were there and aren't there anymore.
Totally.
Because the culture changes.
100%. I mean, the basics are when you sell a thing, it is no longer your thing.
It's not yours.
It's not yours anymore.
And that's hard.
And that's brutal.
Yeah.
Especially for people who sign up for that cult.
Yeah.
And really, companies have DNA. Very hard to change DNA. And so the toughest part about acquisitions is how does the acquiring company and the acquired company, what does their DNA do? And for us, we were just kick down the doors, let's go grow. Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And
super scrappy.
Yeah. And frankly, did a lot of dumb stuff, and it's not like we were perfect, but we had our DNA.
Yeah.
And Bill, they were a public company that had a very different mandate. And it's just even with the best of intentions, those things are tough.
They're hard
to pull off.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to know, and this was the same at Jive. And so that was my second time kind of going through it, but you have to know when you sell something, it's not your thing anymore. And you have to decide if the thing it's going to be is something that long-term you're really excited about, right? Or not.
Yeah.
And you do notice a lot of times in startups that group, they'll go to the next startup, right? They'll go build something.
Yeah. I remember I was at Vivint, and anytime you get on a ladder, you kind of look to the top of the ladder and say, how high can I climb this thing?
Yeah.
And I remember when we sold to Blackstone, they brought in a really talented executive team.
Okay.
But this was MIT, Harvard, the entire C-suite.
Not UVU dropouts.
And that just wasn't us.
Yep.
And it was actually really hard, because you go from like, we are the executive team to there's a layer between you and, the founders. And I remember working through that, and it wasn't a small work through. Like, we thought the Blackstone, it was a 5-year run, and it was a 10-year run.
Yeah.
So you're working through that for a decade. And I remember it got to a point where I realized I'm as high as I'm ever going to be in this business, and I don't want to be any higher. Like, that next step isn't what gets me excited. Like, what gets me excited is the building phase and the younger phase and kind of the storming phase of creating. And it was insightful. It was really good for me, but I don't think I could have realized that unless I experienced the other. You know what I mean?
Isn't it so ironic how a lot of times you have to see the other side to make sure it's not green.
Yeah.
And until you like either experience it or you get right up close next to it, you don't really know.
Yeah.
I just think that's a truism for anything. A lot of people think they want to be an executive. Like, do you understand what someone like you or what someone like Todd went through to build that business?
Yeah.
And like, most people wouldn't want it.
And I didn't understand what Todd and Alex went through. Like, I was shielded.
Yep.
Like, I think I made over $1 million of cash comp for like 14 years. It doesn't matter if it's a good year, if it's a bad year. It was a good year for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm in a revenue role, you know? And so I'm not like sitting around thinking about like, are we tripping credit covenants?
That's right.
Or, you know what I mean? Like that wasn't, I didn't lose sleep over that stuff. And I'm not worrying about doing riffs of 20%, And so even for me at this point, I have so much more. I always appreciated those guys.
Yeah.
But I've got more appreciation now with the sleepless nights that come from being responsible for people. It's a different level of stewardship.
It is. And anyone who appropriately understands that stewardship, like, that's just a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And so some people think they want the big job. Almost nobody actually wants the big job if they knew everything that it entailed.
So I did one of these with David Neilman.
Okay. And
we're kind of finishing it up, and I asked the last question. I said, what would you tell kind of an aspiring entrepreneur? What lessons would you give them? And his answer was so insightful for me. He said, it's not for everybody. And I was expecting to say, you do this, you got to try hard and you believe in, and it was like, no, like, if you don't go to bed dreaming about it, and if you don't wake up dreaming about it, and you're willing to work all hours of the day, and it's not for you, like, you have to be obsessed if you're going to go build a business, because it requires that much.
Yep.
And I think you see people like that have done it, to sign up and do it again is really hard.
Yeah.
And some people just never do.
Yep.
They just say that was a time and season. I just can't start that journey again.
It's so true. And I would even go a little further. Not only is it not for everyone, it's not for most people. Most people shouldn't sniff it. Like, take venture-backed startups, for example. Getting on that treadmill is something almost no one should do. It's a niche product for someone who wants to sign up to go get $100 million of revenue in 5 years.
Yeah.
And you want to be accountable to that. And you want to look people in the eye and you're like, I'm going to go do that. And the people who can do that aren't a little bit crazy, like, they're just crazy. And you have to be willing to grind through stuff with very little encouragement and very little, like, in the way of support. And then, if you end up making it, then you get tons of support and encouragement and accolades. But
until you get fired.
Well, which we're all getting fired at some point. But yeah, exactly.
So this was like, again, another like super insightful one for me. So go to Harvard and do this launching new ventures course.
Okay.
And there's this guy named Jim Sharp, and he's teaching this class, and his track was he, went to Harvard Business School, then he went and worked under Jack Welch at GE. And then he did a search fund and went out and found a business, bought the entire business, SBA loan, kind of similar manufacturing, operating, and ran it for 25 years.
Okay.
No outside equity. And he kind of put this proposal out there. And it wasn't that there's a right or wrong or a good or bad. He said, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And he talked about the differences. You know, if you take that venture money, you're deciding that we're going to go try to optimize equity value.
Yep.
But it's not your company anymore.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs actually know that.
Yeah.
They don't actually know that they got on the treadmill that they got on.
Well,
and that's really hard, you know?
It's really hard. The other thing is, for the last 10 years, what we've held up as like the standard for success is you raise, and then you raise more, and then you raise more. And the truth is, that couldn't be more wrong for 9 out of 10 startups.
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, they're optimizing for something different. It works really well for the 1 out of 10. But we've kind of misincentivized people, I think, in the industry a little bit. And so like when I take pitches, most of my pitches are convincing people like, great business. You have a great business. You shouldn't raise money. And let me tell you why. And if somebody can break through those, then you're probably a good candidate for getting on that treadmill.
Yeah. And his proposal was that like, there's 2 routes. I was an entrepreneur, but I was king. I had my little kingdom.
Yeah.
If I want to take a little money, extra money out of the till to go on vacation, I do it. And I hire who I want. Like you have like a little, you know, and that's actually a different life.
Very.
Than I'm going to take a seed round and an A and a B. And like the only outcome is sell to somebody or go public.
Or go public.
You're on this track.
Yep.
And it was something that I was naive to, like, and I shouldn't have been. Like, if you think about it at all, you're like, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I don't think people think about it. I don't think they fully realize what's happening.
And in the go-go times, the best bull rush we've ever had, it just kind of happened naturally.
That was just that was the sequence.
Yep. The equity got more valuable. The exits happened. And I think now we're kind of waking up to really what it means. And when you take money from people, such a fiduciary responsibility.
It's heavy.
Heavy.
Yeah.
Because like, and if you raise from venture, you might think it's some firm, but really it's Utah Retirement Systems. It's the firefighters' pension. And so like you are accountable to deliver returns so firefighters can retire.
For sure.
Think that's not heavy? Like again, it's wonderful mechanism for a very small portion of companies and founders.
Yeah. And you think about like the Divvy thing. You guys created a lot of value for everybody that got on that journey with you.
Yeah.
I think that's the other side of the coin is I think about Vivint, hundreds of millionaires.
Yep.
Because they decided to buy into that, you know, that journey. That's like the other extreme that's like really cool, you know, like if you really do want to sign up for it and you go execute and you go build it, you can change a lot of lives.
And that's why we do it, right?
Yeah.
Is it's asymmetric upside. And there is a certain type of company, a certain type of founder where there's nothing better because it is the vehicle to change the most lives in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I think there's nobility in business building. You think about the amount of people who can pay for mortgages and college and healthcare and that wouldn't exist if there weren't entrepreneurs out there crazy enough to give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I just that's where you see so much respect.
I think the biggest act of charity is to start a successful business.
I agree.
You're serving at a high level.
Yep.
Like for me, business is a spiritual game. Like I get tremendous fulfillment out of business. Like it brings you to your knees, you know, but you also get to like push people to go be their best and believe in them more than they believe in themselves. And if you go you think about how much of our lives we spend in a career.
Yep.
And as the leader, you have the opportunity to go create the culture. And it can either be the most inspiring journey that people have ever been on, or it can be like a really like depressing place to work.
That's right.
And most of it's a choice on leadership and how you see people and how you treat people. And so
And are you trying to push the envelope? Are you trying to be the best you can be?
Yeah.
Grow the fat? Are you trying to do that
Care
stuff?
about excellence.
That's right. Or are we all just here kind of making sure we get a paycheck and then we can go home? But man, doesn't that just feel like you're not really living? Like life is happening to you instead of something that you're proactively doing. And yeah, couldn't agree more.
So talk to me about the next stages of the journey. You know, you're working with Pelon. You know, we have so much admiration. Pelon's like a really important part of the Sandlot journey. You know, Dave was an intern at Pelon, and Blake, you know, has always been just big time mentor of Dave's. And, you know, I just admire you guys. Like I admire the company that you built, the reputation you have. I think about Utah as a whole.
Yeah.
And how much bigger and better Utah is because of that focus from that, you know, from, you know, that team. And so talk to me about kind of the next 3.0, you know, the next stages of the journey.
So by the way, the reason for joining Pelon was the exact same stuff that you talked about. What like Blake Maude and Chris Cooper and some of those folks have done to help Utah's ecosystem really like up level was something that I was very interested in being a part of and continuing to grow out in kind of like the next phase.
Yeah.
So, and it's been really fun to learn more about the venture side of our world. I thought I understood it. You know, you've been in a bunch of board meetings, you fundraised with, you know, with the team and stuff. But until you sit on that side of the table, you don't really understand what it's like. So that learning's been awesome. And for me, I think I love it. You meet with founders and they're excited and they have dreams and like you can maybe be a small part of that is really cool. I also think that operating startups and investing is going to create a lot of value.
Yeah.
And I told you I have like $1 million mistakes and I am eager to put those to the test.
Yeah.
And so I think for me,
you're an operator at your core, right?
You know, I think I'm both.
Yeah.
I think, and by the way, so like people who I really like, Mike Spicer from Sutter Hill, Keith Raboy at Khosla, like, and they're operating companies and they're investing. And I think it makes you the best of both.
That's kind of like how you see yourself.
That is
what you aspire to be.
That's what I aspire to be.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think you get better at both. So, you know, we'll see how that all turns out, but sitting in this chair right now, that's what I think I want to go try to be excellent
is
at.
Go do something.
Yep.
Yeah. Go step into something and go
be a part of the Pelon story that expands and be a part of figuring out how to operate startups simultaneously and figure out kind of what I think, because with how some of the economic stuff has turned out, my thing is there's going to be way more venture dollars than there are venture backable founders and companies.
Yeah.
So why is someone going to take Pelon's money over someone else's?
You got to be able to bring some value.
Got to be able to bring like real tangible value.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is being active from an operating perspective, having relevant operating experience.
Yeah, I mean,
not that's 15 years old.
No one wants Uncle Rico. Like
That's
no
right.
one wants somebody that did it 20 years ago.
Exactly.
To actually like be in the arena.
Yep.
You just have more credibility.
100%. And by the way, I think you're a better investor because you're understanding the tailwinds, the headwinds. You can really get a better sense for those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I want to give that a shot. That's what I think I want to do.
Talk to me about family, being a founder and also being, you know, a family man.
So I have a wife. She's the best part of everything. I have a little 22-month-old daughter. She's like the best part of every day. You don't realize, and I love work so much. I love the career stuff. I was really worried having a kid that I wasn't going to actually like it.
Yeah.
And that was a very stupid thing to worry about. She smiles. And I would give every dollar I've ever made away for one more feeling like watching her smile or watching her laugh. And I mean that seriously. And so it's the best. I do love the progress that work brings and that pushing yourself brings and that putting in the hours and stuff brings. So I'm definitely not like I don't have a lot of time, but what I do have, I can make more of an impact. So it's like, I might not be there for 10 hours. I might be there for 1, but how do I make that 1 hour better than most people's 10? So I think about that a lot. And,
what do you and your wife do to maintain, a vibrant relationship? How do you, I know that there's this, you're either growing together or you're not.
For sure.
And I think hard things and stressful things will either like bring you closer, they'll tear you apart.
Yeah.
How do you make that number one, but also be excellent in your career?
So I think for me personally, I'm really bad at this. I don't think I'm good at this. I think the way that it works for us is that Sydney is kind of just a saintly figure who knows my nature better than anyone, and like buys into that. Like when Divvy was all done, I remember we had a conversation and she kind of thought, well, okay, like this is it.
Are we done?
And I was like, oh, it actually wasn't about like earning a living. It was about who I become in the process of chasing something bigger and something hard. And that was hard. That was like, I think a bit challenging of like, well, why would you spend time away from us if you didn't have to?
Yeah. Cause I think there's a difference between like, this sacrifice is required for us to be financially independent, to be like, to secure our future versus I just want to go make a dent in the world.
That's right. And I think that was an interesting moment for us. But people who, in all the credit to her, but like people who know what it takes to make someone else happy, they usually are okay with that. And like, this is in our nature. But here's what I'll say is I try to pay really close attention. So I know the things that I need, and I need to be able to spend X amount of time at the office or whatever. What does she need? And how do I make sure that I'm actually checking those boxes? And those things for us are like, hey, can we make sure that like for at least a good chunk of time between like Saturday and Sunday, we just get to be together. Doesn't really care like where we are, what we're doing, but we're physically together. A way that we did that at Divvy was for like 43 weeks in a row. Friday night at 11 o'clock, we'd get on a plane and we would go somewhere. And we would come back Sunday early afternoon. And because you just like, I couldn't leave. And so we just did that.
Physically, had to like move.
Had to.
Yeah.
So that was an example of, like she needed that. And it was awesome for me.
No, we've done something, not that, but we've done it similar. It's probably our whole marriage where every couple of months we physically go somewhere. And it's about what it takes for me to like disconnect, because it's almost too tempting for me to hop back on my phone or jump back into a project that I didn't tie out if I'm too close. But if I'm physically gone, and we've talked about that a lot, of those deposits compound over time. We've been married coming up on 19 years.
That's awesome.
And you're different humans 19 years later. You're not the same person as when you got married. For good and for bad,
What have you seen work with people who like once they kind of gain some sort of independence or seniority kind of later in their life? How do you, because they go interesting ways, right? Like sometimes the marriages and the families, they work out. Sometimes they like blow up spectacularly.
You think about it, it's 50% break, 50% don't work. And that's always been a cautionary tale for me.
Yeah.
Where, for my whole philosophy on life is that a lot of people will give you advice and you should take advice from like 2 out of 100. And the 2 out of 100 you should take it for are the ones that you would trade places. And so specifically around marriage, I think about, I don't want to be married want to be in love. I
Yeah.
want to have passion, and I want to but that takes work and that takes dedication. And so it's finding examples of marriages that I really admire.
Okay.
Similar with business. I'm like, I don't want an average business. That doesn't excite me. I want something that inspires me, that we're making a difference both for our employees and for the people that we serve. That we're value adding part that inspires me.
Totally.
That when people think about you, they think about, man, they always deliver, they always add value.
Yeah.
But most people aren't that. Most companies aren't that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, for me, trying to find the examples of excellence.
So do you believe you can be excellent in all those different areas? Can you be physically and your family and your career? Can you be excellent in all of them?
I really do. At least aspirationally excellent.
Okay.
I think you can aspire to have a healthy body and to be educated and to be great with your finances and great in your career and have a great, directionally, you're not going to get there unless you have a model and you're working towards it. It's not that you're hitting it.
Yeah.
But what I know is that if that isn't one of your goals, by default, you're going to get pulled away from it.
For sure.
Just because life gets too busy.
Yeah.
And your work will take everything you will give it and more.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So if you don't shut it off, it will consume you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated, right? The greatest of the greats, the Bill Gates, the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezos, find me one of those who has an incredible family with the kind of success that they've had with it is rare.
So this is what I tell you is I have two mentors,
Okay.
Todd Peterson and Alex Dunn.
Okay.
And those guys were exceptional at business. They couldn't have had better leaders to work under.
Mm-hmm.
They also have stayed married and are great dads and are really excellent investors and give back in a big way to the community.
Okay.
So I personally have
You've seen it.
I'm 10 or 15 years younger than these guys. And these are models that I look to and said, that's what I want to be when I grow up. If I could be that.
Yep.
And so it's not the Jeff Bezos or the Elons or the, Bill Gates, but there are examples, there are examples of people. And a lot of that's just values. You know what I mean? I think philosophically, with my religious beliefs, that matters a lot.
Yeah.
And I think with other people, it doesn't. It's less, less important.
So for the record, I agree with you. You think about God, right? Does God get to pick? Well, I'm going to be good at work. I'm going to give 100% to work, but I'm going to have a pretty crappy family situation. Or hey, I'm going to have an awesome family, but I'm going to kind of be mediocre in my career. That doesn't even compute.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about aiming for the highest standard that you can, you have to figure out a way to be excellent at all of it.
And so this is what I would say also. I actually have strong opinions on this subject. You can have anything in the world that you want, but you can't have everything. And so I think there's 6-7 categories that matter.
Okay.
I think it's your faith. I think it's your body. I think it's your personal growth. I think it's your finances. I think it's your career. I think it's giving back to the community. And outside of that, there's but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't fall in those categories.
Yeah.
You kind of got to say no to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
And it takes 10,000 hours to be excellent. So you got to commit to those, and then you got to go find models to follow, and by not deciding, you've decided.
That's right.
By not being deliberate, you've actually decided.
Indecision is a decision.
Yeah.
It just is. Everything you're not proactive about, something else has been chosen for you. You just weren't in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I agree.
What do you tell entrepreneurs that are starting the journey? Because you do this right now.
Yep.
You mentor a lot of young leaders. What's the best advice or the advice you wish you would have got when you were 21 years old, 19 years old, 25 years old.
So the very best thing you can do is be a part of an excellent startup before you try to go do it yourself. That there are people who are very capable and who do it without ever seeing it. Todd Peterson's one of those. But if you are going to get in this game and you don't immediately have your Facebook idea, go work at an excellent startup. See what the pace is like, the innovation's like, learn from great leaders. It's the number one thing you can do. By the way, when people ask like, how do you get into venture? I say the same thing. Go be a part of an excellent startup. Go own a material portion of an excellent startup. So that's like advice number one. Number two is really, truly, we talked about authenticity a little bit. Don't play someone else's game. Why are you here raising money? Is it because it's what you think you're supposed to do? Or is it because you know this is the only vehicle for you to go as fast and as far as you want to accomplish your goals and your dreams? But we end up playing pretend in other people's games a lot, and you got to strip all of that away. And what do you want? So your metaphor of do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? I think is a really good one.
Yeah.
What do you personally want? If I had a magic wand, tell me what it is.
Ideal?
That's right. Because half the time you shouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
And I can help you. I can help people figure out what it is they truly want. It's I want to make $50 million. I'm that is an amazing goal. You should have nothing to do with this. Go grow it like this and then go sell it to someone like that. And you did it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other one. Truly understanding yourself. Because until you do that, you can't
really tough.
You can't chart a course.
Yeah, but it'd be really tough.
It'd be really tough.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Last question. Talk to me about faith and how it's factored in the journey.
So I have had times where I didn't have any faith. I've had times where I've had a lot. And Casey, one of the things that's funny is whenever you stop putting work towards anything, you're just going backwards at a very rapid rate. And so I want it to be a bigger part of my next chapter, because just suppose for a second that there was somebody who died for me. Somebody who has, an understanding of who I am and what I'm capable of. Just suppose that that's true. Shouldn't that change everything in my life, everything in my orientation? And so I want to be better at it. Faith, I think, comes, some people are naturally blessed with it, some people aren't. But I want it to be a bigger part. I want to spend more time understanding what it means, for me in my life and my family's life.
How do you think about it? How does it factor how you treat people? How does philosophically, how does it fit with business, with personal, with your marriage, with everything,
I want people to think of me as a Christian, a Christ-like person, meaning when you interacted with me, it was it was a good experience. Yeah. There was generosity, there was humility, there was all of these things. And I'm miles away from this, but I want that.
Yeah.
And I I gotta figure it out. Some people are amazing at this.
Yeah.
And I think they are the truly, you just think about life in terms of levels and you kind of graduate. I think the last level you graduate to is that those interactions that everybody leaves them.
But I think it's a journey. And I think we all get on this journey when we're ready to get on this journey. I think about my father-in-law and, grew up, with Baptist parents, Christian, down in Texas. Meets my mother-in-law and, they end up, the missionaries find him. They join the church. My mother-in-law is a force of nature. It's always been so easy for her.
Yeah.
And it's just central. For my father-in-law, I think he likes it, but he really likes my mother-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now he's at kind of a stage in his life where it's, it's really important to him, but he's 60.
Yeah.
And it's taken him time to kind of figure out, where it fits for him. And you know what I mean? But I think about it for me and just how much it factors in. You're going back to, can you stay married and be great at business? And, how do you do your equity pools? And I think like for me, faith factors a lot. It's like just the golden rules of do unto others as you would, have them do unto you, and love God and love your neighbor. Like you're kinder to people. Like I think some of those simple things matter a lot.
And I've had experiences with people in the work setting that I totally screwed up.
Yeah, you're not proud of.
Yeah, I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
Like maybe where I was technically honest, but I was like tricky, and I don't ever want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And you do, like in your day to day, I think a lot of how I view faith is that we are here to get the most out of our potential. And that one thing that I believe I can do is help others get the most out of their potential.
For me, that's spirituality. Like that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
It's one thing to grow personally. It's another thing to be a steward and to help other people achieve. Like that's like when you think about your deathbed.
Yeah.
And who's showing up.
So you'll get a kick out of this. My grandpa died a couple years ago. We were at the funeral, told great stories. And on the drive back, I'm like, man, I wonder if grandpa had heard all those stories or if some of them were new. So I started doing this thing with my close friends and my close family. Once a quarter, we do a funeral for someone who's still alive. We do the whole thing. The songs, the eulogy, the talks, we do the whole thing. And part of the magic of it is that you get to hear how you have or have not impacted someone's life. Well, there's still time to do something about it. And I write down, at the beginning of the year, the goals. And so when my funeral comes around, I've got my notes and I'm like, okay, what are they going to say about me? It wasn't the stuff that I wanted them to say about me. But the good thing is I'm still kicking and I can go work on that stuff.
That's incredible. Did you come up with that?
Yeah.
I think that's like one of the coolest ideas I've ever heard.
I have since preached it to a lot of people. And I've only ever gotten back, like this changed our family. We all, cried. There was just amazing.
So the only like close thing that I experienced with that. So Todd Peterson retired and he had his retirement party.
Yep.
And it was kind of like a funeral. It was a death of a founder. But you had everybody that he'd touched. And just tears all night long.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful for all of us.
Yep.
To just realize this is a beautiful life that's touched a tremendous amount of people. And how magical to be able to experience it when you're still living.
That's right.
When you still have gas in the tank.
That's right. It's
a reminder that I need to do more of it. And if the stuff that you want people to remember you by, they don't.
Make some changes.
Like I need to go figure out how to implement it in a way that's like really good. You know what I mean? Because if you're gonna do it, go send it. Like,
I can send you my program because I love it. And it took a little bit. People were a little apprehensive. Like it felt a little weird because I said, like, I need you to prepare like you were speaking at their funeral, like they're dead. And that puts you in a headspace that we don't like to be in, right? You don't like to think about your mom or your wife or whoever passing away. It's very uncomfortable. But those are also a depth of like emotion that we all should be
cool.
Talking about that more often. Because, so like we're only here for a smidge.
When I think about my funeral and how I want to be known, I live way better in the present.
Amen.
You know what I mean? Like that's beginning with the end in mind.
Totally.
And I think it's a really healthy, it's kind of a Stephen Covey practice, of visualizing the end from the beginning.
Totally.
And then building your life to make sure that you check those boxes.
That's right. Absolutely.
Brother, it was so fun catching up.
Thanks.
Can't wait to see the next chapters of the book, and we'll get you back on here a year from now and go see kind of what 3.0 and 4.0 look like.
Appreciate you, Casey. Thanks.